I've always been two things in my life. I've always been a musician and I've always been an environmentalist. So these are pretty much two pillars that have dictated my whole life and all of my life decisions. When I was, when I was in school, in early school, like in my second grade and third grade, while most of my friends were very obsessed with, their television and, watching television serials, watching cartoons, playing video games, I was always obsessed with my music system. My music system was pretty much the center of my universe. So always my ears were more important than my eyes. So my hearing was always much more important than my visual sense. So what I would do is that I would listen to a whole lot of music. I would try to pull apart the music, try to understand what instruments have been used in every song and what were the musicians thinking while they were composing that particular music. And along with being a musician, as I said, I've always been an environmentalist. And, for me, I've always loved the natural world. I love the forests. I love the wilderness. And, while my friends and family would run away from, seemingly dangerous animals like snakes and frogs and creepy crawly creatures like lizards, I was always, as a child, I was always very drawn towards them. I would go towards these animals. I would try to look into their eyes. I would try to see personality in every single animal. And for me, it was never my world and their world. It was not separated. It was always our world. And I always felt that each and every animal on our planet is a very, very important part of our ecosystem. And all of them are our brothers and sisters, which is pretty much at the root of our culture in India, which is basically Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We always think of it as being, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is living in peace with Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Christians, different parts of the human race. Whereas actually Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means living in absolute peace with every single entity on this planet, every single living being on this planet. So anyway, coming back to my musical career. So when it is in our 12th standard, as all of us know, we have to make a very strong decision as to what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And I'm sure that all of you over here have always been in that dilemma. We've always been in that dilemma, because how do you convince your parents that, that you want to be a musician? How do you convince your parents you want to be a filmmaker and things like that? So similarly, I faced a huge problem because I come from a family of doctors. My father is a third generation doctor, and of course, he's an Indian parent. So obviously, things are going to be very difficult if you want to get into a career of the arts. So I went to my father and I told him very clearly during my 12th that, that I want to be a musician for the rest of my life. I want music to be my hobby. I want it to be my profession. And my father thought I was absolutely crazy. And he got really angry, and there was a lot of fighting at home and a lot of drama at home. And later on, to create a compromise with my parents, I decided that, I just let in and I made a compromise with my father that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. And once I get that degree in dental surgery, my life is my own. So you guys are very lucky that you all are studying in such an amazing institution, because I did not get that privilege. So, and I really wish I could study in an institution like yours, like at AAFT. And I wish I could go back in time and do something like that, but I could not. So I went to 5 years of dental college. And at the end of 5 years, I did not know anything in dentistry, but I got a degree in dental surgery, which is pretty much a testimony to the education system nowadays. So I got the degree, and I very ceremoniously went to my father and I gave him the degree. And I told him that you can keep the certificate, because I'm going to be a musician for the rest of my life. And after that, as they say, there was no turning back. So I started off my musical career doing jingles for television and for radio, jingles for various brands. And in a span of about 12 years, I managed to do 3,500 commercials. So I was very successful at doing that. I used to work really, really hard in the studio. As you can see, right now also I'm under lockdown, but I'm constantly at my studio. I spend pretty much every awake moment of my life in my studio. If I'm not traveling, that is for concerts. So if I'm at home, I'm always at my studio. I eat my lunch over here. I eat my dinner over here. And I'm constantly making music. So, and this is my favorite place to be in, So basically I did 3,500 commercials in a span of about 12 years. I did commercials for Airtel, for Vodafone, for Toyota, for Suzuki, for Air India, for Lufthansa, for Pepsi, for Coke. So basically I was doing jingles for every single brand and their competitor. And in every part of the world, I was doing for brands. I was doing music for brands in France, in Germany, in USA, You name the country, I was doing music for them. And doing jingles was quite a great experience for me, simply because every day is a new experience. When I'm composing music for jingles, like for example, yesterday I would do a jingle on, let's say, a Tamil folk jingle. Today I would get to do a rap jingle. Tomorrow I would get to do a Celtic flavored jingle. The next day I would get to do a heavy metal jingle. So basically every day was a new challenge, and every day you're working with a completely new creative person from a different agency or a director. So you're learning new perspectives to everything. You're learning about new different genres of music. You have to constantly be on your toes, because when you get the brief in the morning, you have to deliver the jingle by the same evening, or even sometimes the same afternoon. So basically you cannot learn up a new genre of music. You have to be constantly at your toes, and you have to know about every genre of music. You have to have a beautiful database of musicians, because let's say it's a heavy metal jingle, then you need to immediately know at the top of your head, that this is the drummer I'm going to call, this is the guitar player I'm going to call, this is the bassist that I'm going to call, this is the singer I'm going to call. Or if it's a Celtic jingle, mostly for Celtic jingles, like, you need a Celtic harp, or you need a Celtic flute and all these different instruments. You need a Celtic singer or a Gaelic singer. These are not available in India. So immediately you have to know that, all right, in France, we have these musicians, or in America, or in Los Angeles, we have these musicians, and you have to immediately be able to figure out who these musicians are and record them remotely. And you have to be able to work different time zones. So sleep is optional. You're going to get very little time to sleep, because you're going to be working on multiple time zones. So that's why it keeps you constantly on your toes. And also you end up learning how to love every single genre of music. And you end up not hating a genre of music, because some people say that, oh, I don't like heavy metal music. Oh, I don't like rap music. At the end of the day, you do not have those kind of luxuries of saying you hate a genre of music. But within those genres of music, you have music that you like or not like. So sooner or later, like what had happened with me, is that you do not start thinking in terms of genres of music. You only think in terms of two genres of music, that is good music and bad music. Or rather, going more in detail to it, you start thinking about music that I like and music that I don't like. But you don't try to vilify an entire genre of music, or you don't try to say an entire genre of music is not good. So that way it was a very good experience, because I would say most of my education in music came from actually doing jingles, because that taught me so much, working with all these people, working with these creative people, having conversations with them, having conversations with musicians on a daily basis, learning from their life experiences, learning from their forms of music. So that is how I became more of a fusion musician, because I learned from all these musicians. And of course, the other thing that I would, another secret that I could let you into is that my whole career of doing music, that is the last 20 years, I have one rule about me working with musicians has always been that I only work with musicians who are better than me. So if there is a musician who I feel that is a musician that I'm a better musician, I would not work with them. So throughout my career of 20 years, if you look at any musician that I worked with, which is in thousands, every single musician has always been a better musician than me. And that's the only reason why I worked with them, because I want to learn from every single musician. And I want those particular musicians to lift up my composition, because I want to make a composition and I want to get, let's say if it's a composition for a flute player, I get the flute player to play on that particular composition, and I want that flute player to make my composition better. So that is my whole idea of doing it. And that's the reason why I only work with musicians who are better than me. So the thing is, as I mentioned, it was a very busy time for me, because I would do almost one jingle a day, sometimes two jingles a day. Every evening and every night, I would keep it completely free so that I could do changes for previous jingles. Because sometimes some client who's done a jingle with me like a month back, comes back to me all of a sudden and says that I need some changes to be done and I need it to be done today. So I would always keep my evenings free for making changes on jingles for the previous day and doing urgent work. Now, while I was doing all these jingles, I was also working on my own independent music. I was working on independent albums. And during that span of 12 years or 13 years, I did 12 albums with Universal Music in USA. Now, these were not part of the movie industry. They were not film albums. They were not Bollywood albums. So that's why it was very difficult for me to release these albums in India. So that's why I released these albums mainly in America, Europe, Australia, in South Africa, Russia, China. These were the places mainly where I released my albums. And these were the places where I would mainly do my concerts. Now, so basically I would make my income from doing these jingles, and I would spend all this money doing doing these albums which are truly from the heart, because these albums were ways of me to express myself, because I felt very strongly about environmental topics. I felt very strongly about social injustice. I felt very strongly about mindfulness, about meditation and things like that. So that's why I decided that, the albums are going to be ways for me to express myself. And this is music that's going to come completely from my heart. And it's very important that all of us as artists, it's very important that we find ways to express ourselves. We're going to get a lot of people who are going to come to us and give us money to create things and to order us to make things. But at the same time, we always have to find time within our own careers to make music that is expressing ourselves, because that's the only way we are going to be satisfied musicians and satisfied artists. Now, then later on, around 2013 or 2014, I met this musician called Wouter Kellerman, a South African flute player. I was a huge fan of his music. He was a huge fan of my music. And both of us were trying to figure out, how do we work with each other? How do we collaborate? So we met in Los Angeles, and we met over a coffee for the first time. And then we realized a huge coincidence that I had just finished making a piece of music on my father of the nation, that is Mahatma Gandhi. And he had just finished making a piece of music on his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. And we also realized that there's a whole lot of cross-pollination over here, because Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi. So he had a lot of Indianness in him. And Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa. So he had a lot of South Africanness in him. So we decided that that's how we're going to work. We're going to make a fusion album based on the ideals of peace and tolerance by Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. And he's going to bring in the South African element. I'm going to bring in the Indian element. So we traveled around the world. We worked with a lot of musicians around the world. And at the end of 2.5 years of making music, we came up with the album Winds of Samsara, which was the highest selling instrumental album in the world for 2014. #1 on the Billboard charts, as was mentioned in my introduction. And we ended up winning the Grammy Award for that album, which is the biggest award for music in the world, undoubtedly. And that was a huge surprise for me, actually. And of course, I really felt that this is an amazing platform for me, because when you win awards, and in my opinion, awards are always very important because it gives you recognition, #1. And #2 is that, because a lot of people say that, that I don't like awards and I don't like this and all. But I say that awards are very important because it gives you recognition, #1. And #2 is that it gives you a platform where, people take you more seriously, and you can do the things that you really want to do within your art. And that's what awards give you. And that's what happened with the Grammys, that when I won the trophy, I was only the 4th Indian to have ever won the Grammy Award. And so I use this as a platform for my environmental concerns, because I'm an environmentalist. So that is when I decided, when I won the award, that every single piece of music that comes out of me is going to be about the environment, or is going to be about positive social impact of a society. And I'm going to stop all forms of commercial music. So then that is when, in 2015, when I won the Grammy Award, I completely stopped doing jingles. I completely stopped doing any kind of commercial work. And I also decided that I'm not going to enter into the movie industry. I'm only going to make music and videos for my music. And I'm going to make productions, which is about making this world a better place in my own way. So then I made another album, as was mentioned in my introduction, which was Shanti Samsara, with 500 musicians from 40 countries. We brought together people like Shankar Mahadevan, Amitabh Bachchan from India. From USA, we had Bruno Mars. We had the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra from London. We had musicians from Vietnam, from Senegal, from Korea, from South Africa, from Australia, Europe, USA. Basically, I traveled every corner of the globe, and wherever I could find a musician who felt as strongly about the environment as me, we collaborated and we recorded, and that's how we made the album. And the album was launched by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the United Nations. And after that, I've gone on to performing this music in more than 35 countries, including 3 times at the United Nations headquarters in New York and in Geneva. And in fact, last year, I had the biggest honor of my life performing in Leh to 10,000 army soldiers at an elevation of 12,000 feet in the Himalayas. So basically, it's very difficult to breathe in those conditions. We had to go there in advance. So it was a beautiful experience. And so we performed my music on the environment over there, and we also showcased my videos on the environment over there. So anyway, so I wanted to talk to you about composing music for film, because that's what a lot of you are going to be doing. So I've composed music for a whole lot of natural history documentaries for BBC and for National Geographic and, and things like that. And there are always two ways to compose music for film, as all of you must be knowing already. The first way is obviously that, you compose the music before the film has been shot. You compose the music before the edit has been created. And so that is the first way. And the second way is basically that you compose your music to film. You compose the music while you're watching the film and you react to the film. Now, there are obviously advantages and disadvantages of both ways. The advantages of composing the film in advance is that, when you listen to the script and you listen to the theme of the movie, you can actually create a beautiful piece of music which is based on the theme of the film, and basically you can influence the whole film in that particular way. And that, in my opinion, is a beautiful way to actually create music, because music can be a very good driving force for filmmaking. So in this particular way, also the other huge advantage is that many times what happens is that directors, and a lot of you are directors over here watching this, many times directors, what they do is that when they edit the film, sometimes the director or the editor, they put in temporary music into the edit, or they put in guide music, or they put in reference music into the film. Now what happens is that the director ends up watching this particular edit to that particular reference music many times, and gets so used to that music that, many times it comes to a situation where the director just asks you to copy that music. So then there is not much creativity on your side, and you just end up plagiarizing music, or you end up making music that is very similar to the temporary music. And no matter, even if you make music which is much better than the temporary music, the director is so used to listening to that temporary music that basically your fantastic music will get rejected. And that's happened so many times for me when doing jingles, where the director comes to me with a temporary music track, and no matter what happens, no matter what kind of music I give them, they're just so hell-bent on using that particular temporary music style that I'm forced to just copy the music. So that is something that if you convince the director that you want to compose the thematic elements, at least one or two thematic elements of the music in advance, then that will help you tremendously to get your creativity alive. Then there is a story also I can tell you about The Dark Knight. When Christopher Nolan was making The Dark Knight, he went to Hans Zimmer and he narrated the script to Hans Zimmer. And the shooting was supposed to start 3 months later. So he narrated the script to him. In 3 months, Hans Zimmer came up with 8 hours of music. He came up with 8 hours of music. He put all that 8 hours of music onto an iPod, and he gave that to Christopher Nolan. And he told Christopher Nolan that during the shoot, keep listening to this music. And during the 1 year of shooting, Christopher Nolan listened to that music and he knew all the 8 hours of music by heart. And he came back to Hans Zimmer and he said that, all right, for this scene, we'll use this music. For this scene, we'll use this music, because I was listening to that music while I was shooting the film. So basically that helped Hans Zimmer so much to bring about his creativity alive. And that is why the score of that movie is absolutely amazing. Now, the second style of composing to picture, that the edit is fully complete, and then making your music to the edit, that also has got a couple of advantages. It's not completely disadvantage and disadvantage. That has also got a couple of advantages. Number one is that, sometimes what happens is that, the director gives you a brief, before the film has been made, and tells you that, all right, you have to compose music to it and all of that stuff, like in the first option. And then what happens is that when the film comes to you, and this has happened so many times to me, where I've kept in mind that this is how the music has to be, because the script was narrated to me in this particular way and all that stuff. And when the film comes to me, the film is a completely different film. It is nothing like what I was told. And then I have to start all the way from scratch. So sometimes it is better to compose to the fully edited picture, because you know exactly what is going on. You know the sound effects that you have to react to, because sometimes when there's a lot of sound effects in a particular scene, the music has to be much lower, or sometimes you don't even require music to be there. So basically in these kind of situations, it obviously becomes better. And also technically what happens is that, as all of you know, all the softwares, the DAWs, the softwares that we use for making music, and the softwares that we use for editing film and all of that stuff, that, sometimes it's easier to put the entire edit of the film on your timeline and then make markers, on to show your various cues for different styles of the music that needs to go into the film and different thematic elements. So you make your markers, you define your cues for music, and then basically you define your tempos, because if it's a chase scene, then the tempo needs to be faster. If it is a romantic scene, the tempo needs to be a little slower. So you define your tempos and then you compose your music. So a lot of composers that I've seen who are friends of mine, they prefer working in this style simply because they like to have the entire film on your timeline, and they like to define these markers. They like to define the tempos, and then they like to compose to the music. And they also like to get the sound effects of the film beforehand so that they can react to the sound effects also while making the music.